It can be challenging, to say the least, to even attempt to understand what it is that the franchise is, well, attempting to do. Kyle Dubas shed at least a little bit of additional light on that yesterday. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. It'll be Penguins versus Jets tomorrow night, because exactly what the Penguins need right now is to run into the NHL's most formidable possible opponent in Winnipeg. That'll be a 7:08 p.m. face-off at PPG Paints Arena. Team practice yesterday. No real news emanated from that. Chris Letang looks like he might be back in time to face the Jets. Other than that, pretty much status quo. Everybody keeps waiting for something big to come of these bad losses. You notice that? After every one of these, it's like, well, tomorrow is the day off, or tomorrow is a day where they could do this, a little bit of a break between now and the next. They're not going to do it. They are not going to do it. If they haven't done it to this stage of this god-awful season, if they haven't reacted to the Penguins losing 8 times when holding a lead, that's the worst in the NHL, needless to say, 5 times when leading by 2 or more goals, they're not about to get radical. And almost as if to support that, or possibly sensing what some of the sentiment is among whether it's the media or the fan base or whatever, Dubas said on this program yesterday, I'm going to read these to you, these quotes, that it seems as if, quote, people want the team to be placed in a very binary position, end quote, and he's referring to whether or not the team is retooling or rebuilding, and he added that he doesn't think it needs to be that way. Quote, our intention and our focus is on continuing to build draft picks up so that it can help the roster right here. Not so much help the roster at large, but help build a group around the existing core that the fans here have known so well and start to transition to the next era of the team. I'm a firm believer, pay attention to this part, I'm a firm believer that if you throw everything overboard, you really have to be careful what you wish for, because you could go a long time before you're back to being a competitive and contending team. So our focus is on trying to, as urgently as possible, bring in using whatever means we have. So in this case, now we're starting to acquire a lot of draft capital. We can use that draft capital to draft players. You can use it to acquire prospects. You can be in the mix now for when very good young players sometimes come available in the league. Previously, I don't think that's been the position here, and so we just have to keep at it. I understand that can bring with it a lot of criticism and angst, but we're steadfast in our plan and vision for the team, and that's what we're going to execute every day. End quote. A lot of words, but not just bleeding there. I mean, there's meaning to what he said there. There was substance to it. And you can tell that it's something that he's put a lot of thought into, he's put a lot of heart into, and I can respect that. I also don't think it has a prayer of working. I'm sorry, I just don't. I can, on the one hand, say, oh, that's an admirable approach. The guy has his hands tied in multiple ways, not least of which, and this is a positive, one would hope everyone could say, that you have Sidney Crosby. And you have to continue putting out, something that's not some embarrassing product. So you can continue to try to do that and keep Sid happy or something. And you'll notice that doesn't come up there, other than the whole thing about those players that people around here have learned to love. It's not doable, what it is that he's describing. Now, I also happen to share his viewpoint about the complete blow-up. We in Pittsburgh are afflicted with fear of the complete blow-up. A, we think it's the end of the world. B, when it's happened around here, it's kind of been the end of the world. That was true of the Penguins 20 years ago, which is why everybody still mentions Generation X every time the Penguins have a lousy loss. And it's been true of the local baseball franchise for only about 40 years. So we don't see a middle ground. We don't look around the NHL to see what it is that Dubas might be describing when he says that you got to watch out what you hope for if you're hoping for a total rebuild, because what he's not going to say and what I can say is probably talking about Detroit here. The Red Wings reached a point where their last gasp of anything was the Henrik Zetterberg, Pavel Datsyuk, and final days of Nicholas Lidstrom. And once those guys were gone, the Red Wings just blew it all sky high. And it was Dylan Larkin and a bunch of dudes for a lot of years. And guess what? It remained, and arguably still remains, Dylan Larkin and a bunch of dudes. I mean, yeah, they've got Moritz Seider now that, they have steadier leadership now in Steve Yzerman. They have something of a direction, but they are still, make no mistake, paying the price for just emptying it all out. And there are a lot of reasons why I'm not in favor of doing that in Pittsburgh. That said, the area where you have to turn the page, and this starts with Dubas, believe it or not Mike Sullivan, because Dubas needs to instruct the organization on hockey direction, and that's to say, listen, Ryan Shea played really well against the Lightning. I haven't been Shea's biggest supporter, but my eyes were open. I saw what he did. Has to stay in the lineup. Jesse Puljujarvi is playing out of his mind. The head coach won't put him out there for more than 10 minutes in the game. That has to change. If the coach doesn't do it, then the GM has to instruct the coach to do it, however uncomfortable that might be. If Drew O'Connor isn't getting top 6 role and he's performing at a top 6 level and the coach still has him painted for whatever psychotic reason as a plugger, then the GM needs to step in there. And if the coach still doesn't do it, when the GM gives the order, that's when something bigger comes into play. When we come back, J1Q. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Today's J1Q comes from Tim, who says, DK, if someone were to ask Kyle Dubas, what do you think you could get for Matt Grizzly in a trade? And if he'd answer nothing, then why the heck is he on your top defensive pairing? Tim, that might be the most scathing thing I've heard regarding Grizzly all season, and that's saying something considering I think those things all the time, at least about his hockey performances. He's been bad. He's been really bad. He's also overpaid. He did not need to be paid $2.75 million to come here on a one-year deal when he had just spent the equivalent of a quarter of a season, the final part of the regular season and into the playoffs, as a healthy scratch. That is not a player who has leverage on you. That is a player who should be coming in looking for a PTO. He should have come in the way, like Brian Boyle did. Remember? He didn't even have a guaranteed spot on the roster like that. And instead, he shows up with a $2.75 million contract. He begins the opening drills. I was there at training camp as Chris Letang's partner on the top pairing. And all that's happened to him since then is that he just keeps getting promoted rather than demoted. He worked his way up onto the top power play. He's out there with a top penalty kill. He's right there behind the Sidney Crosby line to open the game. Logs 20 minutes. So, yeah, that's also a thing. I know there's a reflex among the people who most closely follow this franchise to just pin everything on Ron Hextall and say that Dubas has, as I mentioned in the opening segment, a lot of things that tie his hands. Well, a lot of the things that tie his hands were of his own making, and that should not be ignored. He's the one who signed Tristan Jarry for 5 years. He's the one who signed Ryan Graves for 6 years. Yes, Graves is playing better this season. He's the one who basically threw away the 2023-24 season by bringing a bunch of 30-year-olds in to complement a bunch of 30-year-olds. How was that going to work? So he's not without fault. And bringing up Grizzly is one way, I think, to make sure that keeps coming up. It's not just oh no, we're going to be stuck for the next decade trying to wash away the stench of Hextall. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. We're going to do another one of these tomorrow.